Denali Mountain located in Alaska, the highest peak in North America with a summit elevation of 20,310 feet, equivalent to over 6,100. Not only that, Denali is also famous for being a treacherous and unpredictable mountain because the weather here can change drastically in an instant. From clear skies turning into blinding snowstorms, there have even been 4 people who lost their lives while attempting to conquer this mountain known as the Roof of North America. However, despite the statistics and warnings, a young man still strives to find like-minded individuals to conquer Denali's summit together. So what awaits him on those snow-covered mountains year-round? Will his companions be able to realize the dream of setting foot on the North American summit? All this information will be in the 1967 Denali mountain drama. What happened to the 7 climbers? Please stay tuned right after this. The story begins in July 1967 when 12 companions, who had never met before, embarked on the adventure of a lifetime. Conquering Denali Mountain, the highest peak in North America. However, what seemed like a dream journey quickly turned into a chilling nightmare when 7 of them perished. That is the story of the Denali climbing disaster, one of the most horrific mountaineering accidents in American history. To better understand this tragedy, let's rewind to 1967 when Joe Wilcox, a recent graduate of Brigham Young University, came up with the idea to climb Denali. In his desire to find companions with shared aspirations, he sent out invitations to mountain climbing enthusiasts to join him on the trip. The cost per person was $300, a significant amount at the time, but it would cover food, climbing equipment, and travel expenses from Seattle to Alaska. And perhaps many still don't know, Denali Mountain is located in Alaska and is the highest peak in North America with a summit elevation of 20,310 feet, equivalent to nearly 6,200 meters. Denali is also famous for being a treacherous mountain because the weather here can change drastically in an instant, from clear skies turning into blinding snowstorms. Despite being well aware of these dangers, because Denali had previously claimed 4 lives, Joe was determined to proceed with the trip. And it seemed that his determination and passion inspired many people. His letter received enthusiastic responses, and 8 men from all over the country signed up. Their names were Ann Chelsea, Jerry Claff, Steve Taylor, Dennis Latterhan, Hank James, Mark McLaughlin, Ward Taylor, and John Russell. After gathering enough people, Joe submitted an application to the Denali National Park Management for climbing permission. However, initially, the rangers were skeptical about the climbing group's abilities due to their limited experience. But ultimately, faced with Joe and his determination, the management agreed. At the same time, in another place, a group of 4 men from Colorado also planned to climb Denali on the same day. This group consisted of Paul Schlifter, Howard Snyder, Jerry Lewis, and Jerry's brother Steve Lewis. However, an unfortunate incident occurred. On the way, Steve was in a car accident and broke his arm and nose, leaving the group with only 3 members. Since the minimum requirement to climb Denali was 4 people, the rangers suggested that these 2 groups merge into one to start the journey together. Thus, both parties happily agreed, and this climbing group was named the Wilcox Expedition, after the leader Joe Wilcox. Before starting the journey, the rangers also instructed them to bring radios to communicate with each other throughout the climb. An extremely necessary measure, especially in a treacherous mountain environment like Denali. And then, on the morning of June 22, 1967, the group met and began their challenging journey. The ages of these climbers ranged from 24 to 31. However, according to records, the group members didn't get along well. They frequently had conflicts, tensions, and even sometimes refused to speak to each other. Perhaps, bringing together strangers with different personalities and experiences created disagreements within the team. The expedition's climbing strategy was to break the journey into segments and transport supplies multiple times. Specifically, they would carry gear up to a higher base camp, then returned to a lower base camp to get more supplies and continue climbing. This method had two benefits. It helped them acclimate to the altitude more easily and avoided carrying too much gear at once, making the journey less strenuous. Initially, the trip started quite smoothly, but the joy was short-lived. Just a few days later, they encountered a rain shower that soaked their clothes and sleeping bags. This incident led the group to argue about carrying gear, and they eventually decided to leave behind some equipment, including stoves, shovels, and saws, to reduce weight. But the weather continued to challenge the climbers. A sudden avalanche blocked their path. Fortunately, the entire group overcame this difficulty, and although most people suffered from altitude sickness for much of the journey, no one gave up midway, determined to conquer the summit. And then, after many hardships, on July 14th, they approached the summit. At this point, for easier climbing and movement, the team split into two groups, camping at two different locations. One group camped at a higher position around 18,000 feet, which is about 5,500 meters. This group included the climbers from Colorado, Snyder, Schlifter, Lewis, and Joe Wilcox. For easier tracking, from now on we'll call this the Wilcox group. The remaining group consisted of 8 less experienced climbers, camping at around 4,600 meters. We'll call this the Clark group. The weather at this time was very beautiful, sunny, favorable for climbing, and both groups agreed via radio that if they wanted to conquer the summit, they had to do it within the next 2 days. And as planned, on the morning of July 15th, the Wilcox group decided to set out to conquer the summit while the Clark group continued moving to their campsite. As expected, the Wilcox group successfully conquered the legendary Mount Denali and celebrated by taking photos and setting off flares. After that glorious, victorious moment, they returned to their camp at 5,500 meters altitude, where the Clark group was preparing for their summit attempt the next day. The next day, when the clock struck 1 p.m., the Wilcox group began descending the mountain to return to their camp at 4,600 meters altitude. Angel Chef also went with them because he didn't feel healthy enough to summit due to altitude sickness. At this point, the Wilcox group thought the Clark group would depart at the same time, but that wasn't the case. The Clark group began climbing at 3 p.m., after spending time searching for oxygen tanks buried in the snow. Furthermore, only 6 people from the Clark group climbed up, while one person was forced to stay at camp due to vomiting. Time passed, darkness gradually fell, and it wasn't until 8:30 p.m. that people received news from the Clark group. But this time it was bad news. They had contacted rangers at the Elston Visitor Center via radio and reported that the entire group was lost due to encountering thick fog. The weather at this time had become extremely bad. Thick fog covered everywhere, limiting visibility. Unable to determine their direction in such dangerous weather conditions, the Clark group decided to stay in their current position until the next morning. And then, a long, terrifying silence enveloped everything. No one received any news from them until 11:30 a.m. on July 18, when the Clark group unexpectedly contacted the rangers again. This time, they brought good news. 5 people had successfully conquered the challenging summit of Denali and were preparing to descend. However, this joy didn't last long. They reported being trapped in whiteout blizzard conditions due to intense snow and unable to see anything ahead. An extremely dangerous situation. The call ended with a promise that they would contact again at 8 p.m. that evening. But then, everything fell silent again. That call never came. And the horrifying truth was later revealed. On the night of July 18th, when the Clark group was descending the mountain, the area was hit by one of the worst recorded storms. With wind speeds reaching up to 300 miles per hour, approximately 482 kilometers per hour. The literal fury of nature. This terrible storm also struck the Wilcox group as they were moving downward. By July 20th, after 2 long days of waiting in vain without receiving any news from the Clark group, the Wilcox group said their teammates were in danger and couldn't be abandoned in peril. So they decided to risk returning to the mountain to search. However, this search was abruptly interrupted when snow fell too heavily, forming a white wall that blocked their path. Fortunately, at what seemed like a desperate moment, 5 members of the Wilcox group were rescued by Jeffrey Babcock and his teammates, who were also climbing Denali at that time. In times of danger, mutual support helped them overcome adversity. Babcock and his teammates provided food, water, and helped the Wilcox group return safely to camp on July 25th. But sad news came from the Clark group. At this point, the Clark group had been missing for a week. And then, what no one wanted happened. All 7 members of the group had died. No one knows exactly what happened to them during the climb or in that horrific blizzard. But certainly some people were blown off the cliff by the storm winds. Babcock's group was tasked with searching for the missing. But unfortunately, they only found 3 bodies at 5,500 meters altitude. 2 bodies lay motionless in the sand. The remaining body was found with climbing rope tightly wrapped around it. One hand still tightly gripping the rope, as a final effort to hold on to life. Thus, 7 climbers forever remained on the majestic summit of Denali. They were Jerry Clark, Steve Taylor, Dennis Luchterhand, Henry James, Mark McLaughlin, Walt Taylor, and John Russell. When found, their bodies were completely frozen, unrecognizable. Retrieving the bodies down the mountain was also impossible due to the harsh weather conditions and treacherous terrain. So to this day, they still remain on the summit of Denali, marking the unfinished dreams of young people. Snyder, a member of the Wilcox group who luckily survived, later shared that in such harsh weather conditions, backpacks could be blown away, gloves torn from hands by the wind. Finding her way down the mountain in such circumstances was nearly impossible. Snyder also added, on the cold summit of Denali, they had to endure a cold and painful departure. After the disaster, public opinion surged. Many blamed Joe Wilcox because they believed he lacked leadership ability and skills, having arbitrarily conquered the summit while supporting inexperienced climbers. But without any accusations, Wilcox already blamed himself. He deeply regretted that if he hadn't sent those letters, perhaps this tragedy would never have happened. But Snyder and Luchterhand had completely different views. They believed the responsibility didn't belong to Joe Wilcox at all. According to them, this tragedy occurred because the Clark group didn't take advantage of favorable weather, both on the day we summited and the day they summited, and the main cause was still the weather. Nature is an incredibly powerful force, beyond human control. No matter how strong, experienced, or careful you are, if trapped in circumstances like theirs, facing nature's fury, the outcome would be the same. The climbers also believed this outcome was probably unavoidable, or like a cruel arrangement of fate, and no matter what they did, they couldn't change the result. The Denali disaster, a pain that remains fresh to this day, is still one of the most horrific and deadly climbing accidents in U.S. history. The story of the Wilcox expedition and the 7 young climbers who forever remained on the majestic summit of Denali not only makes us sorrowful and regretful, but also leaves many valuable lessons. The Denali tragedy is a painful reminder of nature's unpredictable power and the constant dangers facing those who want to conquer it. Additionally, this story also leaves many valuable lessons about team spirit. Thorough preparation and especially the importance of following safety rules when participating in adventurous activities. And our story ends here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story with Con Ha on the Suda channel. And hopefully through this story we will cherish life more, understand more about nature, and know how to protect ourselves from hidden dangers. And before leaving, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel to follow more stories. And now Kong Ha bids you farewell and hopes to see you in future videos.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.